Friends, if you want to watch super hit movie Transporter 2 in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we're going to talk about is called Transporter 2. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you, I'm also going to give you all the information on which OT platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production filming, post-production, budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a little small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we'll discuss about the facts of this film's storyline, star cast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end, so let's start the video. Transporter 2 is a 2005 English-language French action film directed by Louis Leterrier and written by Luc Besson and Robert Mark Kamen. It is the sequel to the Transporter 2002 and the second installment in the Transporter franchise, followed by Transporter 3, 2008, and the Transporter Refueled, also called Transporter 4. It stars Jason Statham as Frank Martin with Alessandro Gassmann, Amber Valletta, Kate Nauta, Francois Berliand, Matthew Modine, and Jason Fleming. In the film, Frank Martin, Statham, is tasked with protecting the young son of politician Jefferson Billings, Modine, from an international drugs cartel. Transporter 2 was theatrically released in France on August 3, 2005 by EuropaCorp and was released in the United States on September 2, 2005 by 20th Century Fox. It received mixed reviews from critics with praise for Statham's performance, action sequences, and direction, but criticism for its screenwriting. It grossed $89.1 million worldwide and was followed by the sequel Transporter 3, 2008. Plot: Frank Martin has relocated from southern France to Miami, Florida, where, as a favor to a friend, he becomes the temporary chauffeur for wealthy Audrey and Jefferson Billings. Frank bonds with their son Jack, picking him up from elementary school after subduing a gang of carjackers who try to steal his new Audi A8 W12. Preparing for a visit from his friend Inspector Tarconi, Frank rebuffs the drunken advances of Audrey, whose marriage has become strained. When Frank takes Jack for a medical checkup, he realizes that imposters have killed the real doctor and receptionist. A lengthy fight erupts with the imposters, led by the trigger-happy Lola, but Frank escapes with Jack. Returning to the Billings house, Frank receives a phone call explaining that he and Jack are in the sights of a sniper capable of penetrating the car's bulletproof glass. Forced at gunpoint to let Lola in the car and evade the police, Frank is taken to Gianni Cellini, the operation's ringleader, who demands a $5 million ransom from the Billings. The kidnappers leave with Jack, while Frank succeeds in removing an explosive from his car a split second before detonation. Assuring Audrey of his innocence, Frank recovers a syringe left by the kidnappers at the doctor's office, while Jack is found seemingly unharmed. With Tarconi's help, Frank tracks down one of the kidnappers, Dimitri, and pretends to inject him with the syringe. He follows Dimitri to a makeshift lab where he fights off another henchman and discovers the kidnappers have manufactured a deadly and highly contagious virus. Jack has been infected, passing the virus to his parents. Frank is forced to kill Dimitri, while Cellini's scientist hurls the antidote out of the window. Retrieving one dose intact, Frank sneaks into the Billings home, warning Audrey and using the antidote on Jack. Jefferson, head of the Office of National Drug Control Policy, addresses a conference of heads of anti-drug organizations from around the world, unknowingly infecting them all. Frank races to Cellini's home, defeating his henchmen, but discovering that Cellini has injected himself with the remaining supply of antidote. Cellini explains that the Colombian drug cartels hired him to eliminate their enemies, and that Frank cannot kill him and risk losing the antidote. Cellini leaves Lola to deal with Frank, who fatally impales her on a wine rack. Cellini escapes by helicopter to a waiting jet to Colombia, while Frank steals his Lamborghini Murcielago Roadster and speeds to the airport, climbing into the jet's nose gear as it takes off. Killing the co-pilot, Frank confronts Cellini, who holds him at gunpoint. In the ensuing scuffle, the pilot is killed and the plane crash lands in the ocean. Frank incapacitates Cellini while preserving the antidote in his bloodstream, pulling them out of the sinking plane as the police arrive. At the hospital, the Billings are given the antidote, and Jack has made a full recovery. After visiting the Billings in the hospital along with Jack, Frank drives Tarconi to the airport. Having dropped off Tarconi at the airport, Frank receives an unexpected call from someone who is looking for a transporter, to which he responds, "I'm listening." Cast: Jason Statham as Frank Martin,
Alessandro Gassmann as Johnny Cellini,
Amber Valletta as Audrey Billings, Kate Nada as Lola, Matthew Modine as Senator Jefferson Billings, Jason Fleming as Dimitri, Keith David as Stapleton, Hunter Clary as Jack Billings, Shannon Briggs as Max,
François Berléand as Tarconi,
Jeff Chase as Vasily, Anna Lynn McCord as Carjacker Girl, Tim Ware as U.S. Marshal Hoffman, Mark McCauley as U.S. Marshal Brown, Marty Wright as SWAT Commander, Raymond Tong as Rastaman Music. The soundtrack album for Transporter 2 was released in the United States on the 6th of September 2005 by TVT Records. It features 16 tracks recorded by various artists, including the film score composed by Alexandra Azaria. James Christopher Monger from AllMusic rated the album 3 stars out of 5, citing Grand National's Talk Amongst Yourselves, Angun's Savior, and Milo's Paris 400 as the highlights of the soundtrack. Reviewing Transporter in 2002, I expressed doubt that some of the action sequences were possible. Transporter 2 sidesteps my complaint by containing action scenes that are even more impossible. For example, seeing the reflection of a bomb in a pool of liquid under his car and knowing that the bad guys will not explode it while they're standing right next to it, the hero races the car out of a garage and up an incline, spinning the car neatly through the air so that it makes one complete rotation and the bomb is pulled off by a hook on a crane, exploding harmlessly as the car lands safely. I could observe that this is preposterous, but the fact is, I laughed aloud. Other stunts and computer-generated effects were equally impossible, as when Frank Martin, Jason Statham, flies a jet ski onto a highway and jumps from it into the back of a school bus, and when he uses a fire hose to immobilize a posse of killers, and when he escapes from a plane that has crashed into the ocean, and when he leads a police pursuit up the ramps of a parking garage and then crashes his car through a wall of the garage, and it flies a couple of 100 feet through the air to a safe landing. Either Transporter 2 is wall-to-wall with absurd action, or it's not a sequel to Transporter. And in fact, the sequel is a better film than the original, as if writer-producer Luc Besson had a clearer idea of what he wanted to do and didn't want to do. The direction is by Louis Leterrier, whose Unleashed, released only 3 months ago, had that savage chemistry between a gangster, Bob Hoskins, and a fighter, Jet Li, he had raised like a dog. That movie was also written and produced by Luc Besson, who is the hardest working man in show business. Look him up on imdb.com if you want to feel tired just reading about his plans. Transporter 2 is better for a number of reasons. One of them, that is, has an ingenious plot that continues to reveal surprises and complications well into the third act. This is not simply a movie where the good guy chases the bad guys, but a movie where the story turns a lot trickier than we expected. It begins with Frank Martin helping out a friend by filling in for a month as the driver and bodyguard for a cute kid named Jack, Hunter Clary, whose dad, Jackson, Matthew Modine, heads the United States Narcotics Agency. The kid is kidnapped in a bizarre scheme involving a phony doctor, and then he's recovered too quickly, and without the ransom money being picked up. And it turns out the kidnapping, well, you'll see for yourself. Let me just observe that the methods of the kidnappers involve scientific ingenuity raised to evil genius. Not recently have I seen a movie with a better reason why the worst bad guy cannot be allowed to sink to the ocean floor along with the crashed airplane. But not another word about that. Jason Statham is amusing as a man whose emotions are so well under control that he can barely be bothered to have any. He stars in several martial arts sequences in which he wipes out whole platoons of enemies. They're deployed by Gianni, Alessandro Gassmann, a really big, really mean, really smart villain. Modine efficiently plays the role of the sniveling bureaucrat, Amber Valletta is effective as his long-suffering wife, and Kate Nada plays Lola, a deadly vixen who considers herself dressed after she's troweled on her eye makeup. For Lola, it's run, mascara, run. There's a development of some interest to students of product placement. The transporter drives an Audi. The first shots of the titles play like a commercial for the car. It's quite a car. All right, taking full advantage of the all-wheel drive as it survives those incredible stunts. So sturdy is its construction that after it crashes through the concrete wall while jumping to the other building, there's not even a scratch on the shiny silver circles on the front of the car. There is some history here. In the original film, Frank Martin drove a BMW. Now he drives the Audi. Apparently, BMW did not sign on for the sequel. Strange. On the very same day I saw this movie, I saw another thriller, Memory of a Killer, in which the characters hate BMWs so much they urinate into the car's keyholes. In between, I saw a movie about Truman Capote that mostly featured Chevrolets, which must come as a relief to the BMW home office in Bavaria. It's bad enough when the transporter switches brands, but when Capote drops you, you're over. The plausibility factor is 0, but the entertainment quotient runs fairly high in Nimble Actioner, The Transporter 2. Effortlessly transplanted from the south of France to Miami, sophomore installment in what looks like a viable franchise has rip-roaring chase scenes, inventive combat interludes, and a beginning, a middle, and an end. Slick kidnapping yarn starts off like a bat out of hell and never sags. Pick should do decent biz on home turf in Gaul. It opened Augur. 3, rolling out stateside, September 2nd beyond. Scripter Luc Besson's mind may mimic the shuffle function on an iPod, but the playlist that emerges here has a good beat, and your eyes can dance to it. Nobody who actually enjoyed 2002's The Transporter is likely to feel let down by current effort. Jason Statham is back as dapper and taciturn title character Frank Martin, an ex-Special Forces operative turned driver for hire who transports things for a fee with rigor and discretion. Frank's sheer lethal coolness is nicely established in first 5 minutes, when he removes his freshly dry-cleaned suit jacket before laying to waste a quartet of formidable would-be carjackers. Frank's filling in for a chauffeur buddy, and his cargo for the last month has been young Jack Billings, Hunter Clary, the only son of U.S. anti-drug czar Jefferson Billings, Matthew Modine, and his trophy wife Audrey, Amber Valletta. Frank's sensitivity and powers of observation are demonstrated when, having picked Jack up from school, he tactfully drives past the boy's parents to conceal their argument in progress from the likable tyke. Audrey and Jeff are semi-reconciled after a year's separation. Jeff is out of touch with his son, but viewers are given enough clues to know that Audrey's a great mom, and Frank's as good at handling kids as he is at outmaneuvering any and all comers from the latest multi-ethnic sale at Thugs R Us. Frank promises little Jack he'll never let anybody hurt him. That's on Friday. On Saturday morning, Frank drives Jack to his annual medical checkup so Audrey can set up a surprise birthday party. But psychopathic Hellcat Lola, Kate Nada, and Russian virologist Dmitri, Jason Fleming, with a Boris Badenov accent, have neutralized the receptionist and real doc and taken their places. They're working for aggressively fit baddie Gianni, Alessandro Gassmann. The plan is to inject Jack with a deadly custom-made virus, exchanging the antidote for a hefty ransom from the Billings' even heftier personal fortune. When Jack is abducted, the authorities suspect Frank must have been in on it. And after some very muscular research, including a chase between a jet ski and a bus, Frank learns that Gianni is a very bad man whose real target is much bigger than one little boy. Each set piece ups the ante, with Frank's technique for removing an explosive device from the chassis of his car particularly resourceful. Mano-a-mano fistfight on a pilotless private jet spiraling in free fall for a really long time is ridiculous but fun to watch. Movie-going cats will be jealous as Frank has obviously been issued way more than 9 lives. Comic relief consists of a visit from jovial French police inspector Tarconi, François Berléand, who, as in First Pick, begrudgingly admires Frank's discipline and professionalism, even if he's deduced the Brit's not living entirely off his military pension. Besson plays to the international gallery with a few funny digs at French stereotypes. Thesping is more than acceptable for this kind of genre fare. Gassmann, photographed to tower over Statham, makes a truly creepy villain. Nada is effectively slutty as the literally killer babe who feels overdressed in anything more than a garter belt and see-through bra, and who hates to go more than an hour without icing somebody. Statham continues to convince as the enigmatic but resolutely can-do Frank. Final line of dialogue implies he'll be back. Locations brim with industrial menace, and tech work is fine, with Helmer Louis Leterrier, Danny the Dog, aka Unleashed, sustaining a breathless but not confusing pace.
For those poised to accuse Besson of an originality deficiency, this is almost certainly the only French pick ever to thank Governor Jeb Bush in its closing credits.
This article is more than 19 years old. Review. Transporter 2. There has been a forest of upturned critical noses at this crash-bang sequel to Luc Besson's Euro action flick, Transporter. But it's perfectly serviceable entertainment. Bullet-headed Jason Statham returns as Frank, the ice-cool ex-military driver with a comic fetish for his gleaming Audi saloon. Now he foils a kidnap plot in Miami Beach with digitalized neo-Bond stunts and chunky martial arts mayhem involving Besson's trademark staccato editing and head-turning reaction shots. Besson has certainly been far better for Statham's career than Guy Ritchie ever was. She demonstrates this by wearing her underwear, a small bra, and panties throughout the film. It doesn't matter to her if she's involved in shootouts and martial arts combat, or if she's dancing in front of a group of rap men. Underwear is all she likes to wear. At one point, she says something to Frank about the pleasure they could have while holding a gun on him. Then she licks his face in a way meant to be seductive, but which is actually quite silly. She and Gianni kiss a few times before and after. Implied sex. The camera pans out her body while she lies alone in bed, strategically covered by a blanket. Her bare back and part of her side is seen. When she gets up, she exposes part of her backside. Violent Content Transporter 2A is all about action violence. Aside from brief pauses for plot developments, it's basically a string of quick-cut car chases, shootouts, and kung fu confrontations. Thankfully, while barraging moviegoers with often unbelievable and cartoony action, the filmmakers show us some restraint by limiting the blood and body count. Usually the camera avoids showing us the results of deadly gunshots and often pauses to let us notice when someone has survived a car crash or blow to the head. Having said that, gunshots, car crashes, and blows to the head and other body parts are near constant. In close combat, men are stabbed with glass, a ladder, and a needle. Arms appear to be broken, faces are bloodied, stock henchmen are acrobatically rendered unconscious by Frank's flying feet, and whatever he can find lying about, stuff blows up. One villain apparently dies on a wall of decorative spikes, though we don't really see how. Note to would-be villains: best to avoid pointy things in your interior design scheme. Crude or profane language considering the genre. There is also surprising restraint shown in the amount of bad language, if not in its selection. Profanity includes 1 Ford, 6 or so S-words, and a smattering of "and son of a boss." Jesus' name is improperly interjected a couple of the times. Drug alcohol content, several characters drink, a couple smoke. One married woman comes on to Frank while apparently drunk. Other note for the elements: Frank, a suspect in the kidnapping fights, and disables police officers in order to continue his quest to save Jack in the world conclusion. Some movies are unintentionally hilarious. That's how I remember the first in this series after an impressive opening action sequence. The story and the fight scenes and dialogue contained in it just got sillier and sillier until a friend and I were actually giggling in the theater during the climactic confrontation with my expectations duly lowered. A Transported 2 turns out to be just as ridiculous. but much less amusingly so. The film is best viewed as a comic book movie or a cartoon. That's the only level at which the unbelievable action, spotty acting, and terrible dialogue can possibly work. Even then, most of the car chases and martial arts scenes are confusing and redundant. Cars launch into the air for no particular reason, fly incredible distances, and land either with perfect precision Frank's car or crash into other cars, anyone chasing him. Frank can seemingly dodge bullets in a group of bad guys, all run out of ammo at exactly the same moment when it's time for Frank's 1-on-12 hand-to-hand combat scene. Some fight sequences are so badly edited it's impossible to tell who hit whom or how Frank disabled the bad guy. Jason Sturr, that does succeed in giving Frank some dimension as a man of believable bedrock integrity, with genuine emotions seeping through his heart as steel determination, and that laudable moral center would almost be enough to make you a transporter to a passably comic diversion if it weren't for too much choreographed violence, and for Lola stringing her aggressively garish sexuality through so many scenes. Almost Lola or No Broken Bones, or no this near parody of an action flick, just can't jump high enough to overcome its flaws. Hi folks, and welcome to Chris's Bath Quick Fixes, a series of short, sharp shock reviews specifically designed to cater for titles that have either slipped through the net or simply do not warrant the usual in-depth and comprehensive dissection that I would normally bestow. Technical rundowns will, however, still be thorough. Our offering today is Jason Statham's strenuous sequel to his surprisingly enjoyable The Transporter, an early release for the format Transporter 2, up the ante stunt-wise, and managed to make Statham's ex-Special Forces underworld driver enforcer all the more likable a hero. The Transporter 2 is the follow-up sequel which thrusts driver Frank Martin into yet another wild action ride as the mercenary who transports goods. No questions asked. Frank has recently relocated to Miami, where as a favor to a friend, he is driving for the political Billings family. This short-term job includes driving the parents' son Jack to and from school, which is not exactly the kind of job that Frank is used to. But 6-year-old Jack Billings is hardly the kind of person that Frank is used to. Over his short contract with the family, Frank and Jack become fast friends. However, when Jack is kidnapped, Frank becomes one of the main suspects. Frank has made a promise to young Jack that he wouldn't let anyone hurt Jack. And one of Frank's rules is to never make a promise you can't keep. So Frank finds himself out on the lam against federal agents who are trying to convict him of Jack's kidnapping. While Frank is being hunted, he must also hunt down the man who is responsible for Jack's kidnapping. However, once Jack is reunited with his family, the villain's true master plan is revealed. Young Jack has been infected with a deadly virus, and anyone he comes in contact with is infected as well. Jack's father, a drug enforcement politician, becomes infected unknowingly and heads to a large political summit with key leaders from all over the world. Now Frank must use all of his skills and prowess as an ex-Special Forces operative as he races against the clock to find the antidote. Not only to save his young friend Jack, but also to stop a potential worldwide epidemic. From the reluctant hero to the archetypal villain, to the countless gun-toying thugs, to the high-speed car chases, to the massive explosions, Transporter 2 has all the elements of a formula. Hollywood action movie. Director Louis Leterrier has definitely studied the action film genre. The movie's haute action. Sequences are expertly done, and the fight scenes are well choreographed. Using quick cuts and edits along with well-placed camera angles, Leterrier tackles the film with style and flair. Jason Statham reprises his role as Frank Martin, and he plays it with an enjoyable mix of non-nonsense tough guy, heartwarming hero, and a dash of humor. He is joined by a great cast, which includes international film star Alessandro Gassmann, who plays the Eagle, Johnny with superb strength, as well as Amber Valletta and Matthew Mode, who portrayed a political couple, Mr. and Mrs. Billings. They nicely fill the roles as Jack's strange parents. Jack is likably played by young newcomer Hunter Clary. Then there is Kate Nada, who plays the vicious Lola, a masochistic assassin who is only able to kill if she is in her laundry and military boots. Lola is by far the weakest character in this film, which is strange considering she is supposed to fill the role of unstoppable killer. The fact that the director had to put this lovely young woman into laundry every time she went on a rampage was a weak and impotent character choice. Not to mention that it just added unneeded sexuality into the film. The movie script itself is just a vehicle for the vehicles, the driver, and the action sequences. There were no major plot twists. The story was straightforward. There is absolutely no heavy thinking in this one, only heavy hitting. Plus, the movie also falls prey to the sequel trap of less plot, bigger explosions, more fights, and oftentimes hilariously unbelievable over-the-top stunts. The philosophical danger in this film is that it follows in the footsteps of many others in its genre, such as the Bourne Identity, the Bourne Supremacy, and Man on Fire, by extolling vigilante justice and supporting the idea of the reluctant anti-hero. It seems that Hollywood still believes that the only way to get anything done is to do it yourself, even if that means breaking laws and going outside the system. The movie also praises the idea that as long as the anti-hero attains his goal, it does not matter how many innocent people are hurt in the process because the end justifies the means. Even so, in this story, Frank is often motivated by a desire to do good, save the little boy, and defend himself rather than exact vengeance. Thus, the movie has a light moral worldview despite its questionable elements. I was not a big fan of the Transporter, but for some reasons I found myself really looking forward to the Transporter 2. Probably much better marketing this time around. Snagging my demographic isn't really all that hard. Show some amazing stunts, lots of fights with decent martial arts, and finally add in a hot chick with guns in her hands, and you can pretty much guarantee a huge male audience will show up to see your film. The ad campaign did just that, and sure enough, there I was in the theater. Jason Statham is going to be a major action superstar. This guy just bleeds cool. He's a sharp-looking dude with a killer accent and has mean saw Britain all over his face. Great martial arts moves and a fantastic build make him a shoo-in for the action genre. Oh yeah, it doesn't hurt that the guy is a very talented actor too. Damn, just see him in a Snatch. Most of the action sequences were everything I hoped they would be. And unlike the popular trend of shaking camera a broken bar, the Transporter 2 holds the camera and shot still long enough so that we, the audience, can actually see what's going on in a fight scene. Bravo. The car chases were fantastic. So many films of car chases that it's hard to care about them much. A broken bar. They all just seem the same, but the ones in this film really jumped out at me. Yeah, broken bar. Some of it was way over the top, which I'll talk about below, but they were at least entertaining. The dialogue, the dialogue in this film was just horrible. I lost count of how many times I laughed, not good laughs, at the truly horrendous lines that were coming out of the characters' mouths. Trust me, Broken Bar, if you see this movie, just look for this one. Thank you for the understanding of Broken Bar, for the respect. Eric had Broken Bar. It was so bad, although much of the action was wonderful. A broken bar sometimes just went way too far over the top. When an action stunt or effect is too unbelievable, it loses its effect. Yes, most stunts in movies are not humanly possibly broken bar to broken bar. If they are at least imaginable, then they can still us. But when a stunt is done, that leaves us thinking, oh, give me a break. Then it has no effect and just makes the movie look silly. I had my first experience with really liking a bad movie this past July. The movie was The Fantastic Four. It had bad actors, bad special effects, and an almost non-existent plot. To my dismay, I found myself liking it. Anyway, it charmed me with its goofy humor, comic book action, and the easy chemistry between its leads. The Transporter 2 had the same effect on me. It's a movie where you can just sit back and enjoy the ride, not worrying about whether it's a good movie. It's not. Yes, it's over the top. Yes, it requires you to completely suspend your disbelief for an hour and a half. Yes, a lot of the acting is bad, but it's so darn fun that none of that matters. The Transporter 2 continues the adventures of Frank Martin, a retired Special Forces commando who tries to keep to himself and makes his living transporting cargo in his high-tech Audi cargo, which always ends up causing him more trouble than he was initially paid for. The movie opens with Frank finishing up a month-long stint as a fill-in chauffeur for the wealthy Billings family's son, Jack. His last assignment is to take Jack to the doctor for a checkup. Upon arrival, Jack is kidnapped and held for ransom. This is a decoy, however, for a virus that has been injected into Jack that will infect anyone he breathes on within the next 24 hours. The real target was his father and the other politicians he will be around and breathe on at a conference the following night. Sound ridiculous? It is. In fact, there's no reason to go into any of this movie's plot details. If you go to see it, you know exactly what you're getting yourself into. The Transporter 2 is the English equivalent of a Jackie Chan movie. Plot doesn't matter. Acting doesn't really matter. Stallone, Van Damme, and Schwarzenegger. He's got it all. The looks, the acting, ability, and the moves. This man has amazing athleticism and martial arts prowess. He fights with the pipe, a water hose, a table broken bar, anything he can get his hands on. It's incredible to watch, and the camera work isn't bad either. The director actually lets you see staff execute all of his unbelievable moves. I would only recommend The Transporter 2 to 3 groups of people. Fans of the first movie, you know who you are. Martial arts fans and fans of low-budget action movies who can really suspend their disbelief. You will definitely laugh at a lot of the over-the-top stunts, most of which are impossible. But Statham's physicality is worth the price of admission. He is the British Jackie Chan. The Transporter 2 is not a movie for kids, nor for those who are offended by physical violence. Katie Natoa wears next to nothing in all of her scenes. There's some mild profanity and there's a lot of physical violence. I am a black belt in Taekwondo and a brown belt in Shokin Karate, so fight choreography really appeals to me. Not since The Matrix have I seen such fantastic martial arts choreography in a Western movie. If you don't enjoy non-stop action and some very heavy violence, limbs being broken, stabbings, and a lot of people being shot, stay away. To those who are interested, The Transporter 2 does not disappoint. It is mindless entertainment at its best. Hopefully it will lead to Statham starring in a good movie that can showcase all his talents. Scripter Luc Besson's mind may mimic the shuffle function on an iPod, but the playlist that emerges here has a good beat, and your eyes can dance to it. Nobody who actually enjoyed 2002's The Transporter is likely to feel let down by current effort. Jason Statham is back as damper and tack title character Frank Martin, an ex-Special Forces operative turned driver for hire who transports things for a fee with rigor and discretion. Frank's sheer lethal coolness is nicely established in first 5 minutes when he removes his freshly dry-cleaned suit jacket before laying to waste a quartet of formidable would-be carjackers. Frank's filling in. For a show for Buddy and his cargo for the last month has been young Jack Billings, Hunter Clary, the only son of U.S. anti-drugs are Jefferson Billings, Matthew Mode, and his trophy wife Audrey Umbera. Frank's sensitivity and powers of observation are demonstrated when, having picked Jack up from school, he tactfully drives past the boy's parents to conceal their argument in progress. From the likable to Kiki, Audrey and Jeff are semi-reconciled after a year's separation. Jeff is out of touch with his son, but viewers are given ethnic clues to know that Otter is a great mom, and Frank's as good at handling kids as Cobb. He is at outmaneuvering any and all comers from the latest multi-ethnic sale at Doug's Russ. Frank promises little. Jack, he'll never let anybody hurt him. That's on Friday. On Saturday morning, Frank drives Jack to his annual medical checkup so Audrey can set up a surprise birthday party, but psychopathic Hellcat Lola, Kate Nada, and Russian biologist Dietrich, Jason Fleming with the Boris Bedanov accent have neutralized the receptionist and real Doc and taken their places. They're working for aggressively fit baddie Gianni Alessandro Gassmann. The plan is to inject Jack with a deadly custom-made virus, exchanging the antidote for a hefty ransom from the Billings' even heftier personal fortune. When Jack is abducted, the authorities suspect Frank must have been in on it. And after some very muscular research, including a chase between a jet ski and a bus, Frank learns that Gianni is a bad man whose real target is much bigger than one little boy. Each said piece ups the ante with Frank's technique for removing an explosive device from the chassis of his car, particularly resourceful. Mano-a-mano fistfight on a pilotless private jet. Spiraling in free fall for a long time is ridiculous, but fun to watch. Movie-going cats will be jealous, as Frank has obviously been issued way more than 9 lives. Comic relief consists of a visit from jovial French police inspector Tarquin Francois Berland, who, as in First Pick, begrudgingly admires Frank's discipline and professionalism, even if he's deduced to Brits not living entirely off his military attention. Besson plays to the international gallery with a few funny digs at French stereotypes. Desping is more than acceptable for this kind of genre fare. Gaspin, photographed to tower over Stam, makes a truly creepy villain. Nada is effectively as the literally killer babe who feels overdressed in anything more than a garter belt and see-through bra, and who hates to go more than an hour without icing somebody. Statham continues to convince as the enigmatic but resolutely can-do Frank. Final line of dialogue implies he'll be back. Locations brimmed with industrial menace and tech work is fine with Helmer. Lou leader Danny the Dog, aka Unleashed, sustaining a breathless, but not confusing pace. For those poised to accuse Besson of an originality deficiency, this is almost certainly the only French pick ever to think of. Jeb Bush in its closing credits with the Transporter 2 producer Luc Besson means to beat critics at their own game. How can you criticize the silliness of a movie that embraces its own implausibility? When Frank Martin, the somber to the point of drowsiness superdriver, played here as in the 2002 original with an all-the-way to the bank smirk by Jason Statham, sees the reflection of a bomb beneath his seemingly indestructible Audi, he doesn't get out of the car and remove it. Instead, he performs a corkscrew jump, which would make the Dukes of Hazzard proud, dislodging the bomb on an opportunity-positioned hook. Ridiculous. Absolutely forgiven due to the quality of the rest of the film. Not quite. Considering this is only the second film in what I'm sure will be a lucrative franchise, at least overseas, it seems a little soon to introduce a child into the mix. Always the telltale sign of jumping the shark, but unfortunately, the plot, which has something to do with infecting the world's drug enforcement officers with a deadly virus, actually defies closer inspection. The premise is such ham-handed action movie cliché. Copyright, as is the pseudo-Italian villain Frenilda section, is Pearl. Copyright, and that I specifically chose not to think about it too much. There's even one of those trigger-happy, lingerie-wearing psychopaths that are always on hand in action movies here. Played with their In the Headlights moxie by model Kate Nauda. The first Transporter was pretty ludicrous, but it kept its wheels to the ground. With T2, Mr. Besson reteamed with writing partner Robert Mark Common and apparently decided to abandon all narrative logic. There's actually a moment late in the brash film when Frank has no leads at all. He calls his friend, a French police chief being held by a federal marshal. So, charmed by the Frenchman's cooking, he gives him the run of the precinct. Frank tells his friend, "I have nothing." At which point, his friend sneaks onto the police computer and magically pulls up the address of the bad guy. That's not just lazy screenwriting. It's insulting. If you give the audience nothing to care about, you'd better at least keep the salt action coming. As exciting as some of the scenes are, they are so obviously computer-assisted that they're not any fun. The filmmakers take such fetishistic pleasure in their featured vehicle, this time an Audi rather than a BMW. Perhaps they didn't want to risk damaging it by performing any practical stunts. Mr. Statham, however, gets time for plenty of fisticuffs thanks to martial arts choreographer extraordinary Corey Wen, who directed the first film. The fight scenes are inventive as always. Frank scales a truck to get onto a bridge, tips a boat on a bad guy, and uses a fire hose to dispatch endless faceless thugs. Sadly, the edit Happy, direction by Louis Tria, doesn't give you much of an idea of what's going on. More or less, everyone involved with Transporter 2 has done better work. Mr. Besson had a string of certified hits in the nines, including La Femme Nikita, The Professional, and The Fifth Element, but of late, he seems more interested in turning out the type of low-budget action fare that plays well overseas and goes straight to import DVD in the US. Something tells me that's where you'll find Transporter 3. Transporter 2 maintains the typical formula, the good guy chasing the bad guys. Its B-movie plot twists are like an assemblage of action sequel cliché, a tilde copyright, as carefully endorsing the car brand Audi, Frank Martin's Jason Statham Minesic intensity as the usual understated hero effectively moves around in fierce car chases and impossible martial arts sequences. This doesn't stop the movie from being absurdly pleasurable. It suspends disbelief for a 1.5 half-hour escapist action ride. The opening scene plays like an Audi commercial. It takes full advantage of the all-wheel drive to survive countless incredible stunts. The car is so sturdy that after crashing and jumping from one building to the next, not even a scratch can be seen on it. Statham delivers an effective role with his silent charisma as Frank Martin. This makes up for his tacit personality as a man whose emotions seem so well under control all the time. Alessandro Gassmann turns out as a sexy villain. Matthew Mode effectively plays the role of the bureaucrat. So does Amber Valletta as a suffering wife and the loving mom. Kate Nada plays a violent vixen who has fetish in killing mercilessly with her 2 big toys and her countless bullets say, and getting the high on her smudged eye makeup. Finland plays as the film's comic relief and as a sort of accomplice to Frank. This fast-paced motion picture is a hit and miss, at times heart-pumping, at times breaking on the needed suspense. There are pleasurable shots of Miami, but the stunts turn out too outrageous, at times making the audience lose the enjoyment for the sides and scenes. The BEM movie elements are considerably fine for the usual expectations, but much of the action parts lead to the inability to provide enough pauses to let the viewers catch their breaths. With too many action spectacles in the presentation, it gets to the point that one doesn't get to appreciate much of the special effects anymore. A number of story details are also exposed and resolved rather too easily. Sequels rarely live up to their predecessors. But French director Louisier's new big, noisy, dumb action thriller, The Transporter 2, a 1/2 out of a width. Lean, mean Jason Statham behind the wheel again proves the exception to the rule. Mind you, the plot of the original Transporter about the contemporary international slave trade merely provided the framework for a number of audacious auto stunts and hyperkinetic martial arts combat face-offs that obscured its politically correct plot. Famed Hong Kong martial arts guru Corey did double duty on the first Transporter. 2002 as director and action choreographer. No, you don't have to worry about walking blindly into Transporter 2. However, if you fork over the bucks for the new DVD special, delivery version of the original Transporter, you'll find a free ticket inside so you can kill 2 birds with one stone. The first Transporter, ranked as a roller coaster of crime thriller this time around, when serves strictly as action choreographer, while art director Louis Leader takes over the helm on a follow-up film that surpasses its predecessor by virtue of a bigger budget for a larger, more outlandish stunts and more inventive martial arts aerobatics. An equally politically correct plot about an attempt to exterminate the world's head drug enforcement honkos at an international narcotics summit provides the scaffold for these stunts. No, Transporter 2 isn't a foiled assassination yarn. Initially, this 20th Century Fox film resembles director Tony Scott's slam-bang, high-octane action man. On Fire 2004, with Denzel Washington as a bulletproof bodyguard, determined to rescue kidnapped victim Dakota Fanning Pappy Leterrier and his sinister producer Luke, La Femme Nikita Besson and writer Robert Mark Kamen ditched the child in jeopardy plot early on for bigger game. Nevertheless, they were shrewd enough to know that it's not the game that counts so much, but how you play it. The kind of audience that will relish Transporter 2 are those who refuse to let realism dictate the bottom line. They know from the get-go that the hero can't die. Genuine connoisseurs of the genre make allowances for stunts and fights that violate the laws of gravity. In big, dumb, noisy action movies, anything visually possible is plausible, no matter how implausible it ultimately is. Director Robert Rodriguez's shoot 'em up Saga's Desperado 1995 with Antonio Banderas, as well as Once Upon a Time in Mexico 2003 exemplify the prime examples of big, dumb, noisy action thrillers. Some stunts in Transporter 2, especially the fast car driving, have their antecedents in older movies. At least Leterrier and company have taken the stunts a bit farther than previous ones. Sadly, Transporter 2 suffers from clearly obvious computer-generated style video game footage that undercuts the dramatic impact of the aerial scenes. Furthermore, the quality of the mad shots that stand in for different backgrounds is pretty awful. Anybody that saw the original Transporter knows that British protagonist Frank Martin, Jason Statham of Snatch, is more than just a top-notch driver who can get out of the worst traffic jam. Moreover, he can kick, bunch, and shoot his way out of the most ominous predicament. In this latest entry in the trilogy, we learned that Frank is ex-Special Forces and led an elite commando unit for 5 years, specializing in search and destroy. According to the authorities, Frank has been in and out of Lebanon, Syria, and Sudan. The man is a hunter. Stapleton. Keith David grimly informs the family of an abducted child when they arrive at his house to set up a surveillance system to track the kidnappers. The predicaments that Frank faces in Transporter to make the tough times in life. The Transporter look like a cakewalk. When the action opens, we find Frank newly transplanted from the south of France to sunny Miami, Florida. Rather than acting as the wheelman for crazy bank robbers or human slavers, Frank is chauffeuring a high-profile politician's that son, Jack Billings, newcomer Hunter Clary, back and forth to elementary. Actually, Frank is helping out a friend by temping for him. Meanwhile, Jack's parents are U.S. Drug Enforcement Zara Billings. Matthew Mode of Full Metal Jacket and his neglected wife, Audrey Amberla of What Lies Beneath. You don't have to be a genius to figure out that a kidnapping lies right around the band. And that's part of the fun of Transporter 2. Like the previous Transporter, Transporter 2 doesn't stray far from the surefire formula that fueled the first movie's word of mouth success on DVD. Of course, nobody could survive the clothes scraps that Frank survives, but then nobody leads a life as charming as Frank. During an early scene, Frank nimbly thwarts a carjacking. However, Frank's sense of style makes the scene memorable before he tangles with a thuggish gang of ruffians backed up by a bimbo schoolgirl armed with an automatic pistol. Our hero sheds his recently dry clean suit jacket, folds it neatly atop his sleek, shiny car, then demolishes the opposition without a second thought. As her compatriots in crime lay writhing in agony on the pavement of the parking garage around her, the schoolgirl pitches her pistol and takes a powder. This amusing little incident nearly makes Frank tardy for his appointment to pick up Hunter. Punctuality guides Frank's way of thinking. During the brief time that they have known each other, Hunter and Frank have managed to bond. Yes, Transporter 2 takes shortcuts when other, more realistically oriented movies might wallow about for 20 minutes, showing the bonds as the characters forge them. Frank and Hunter grow close enough that Hunter treats Frank as the father that the youth wishes that his real-life dad were. Audrey notices this bond when she isn't quarreling with her husband, who has let his duties override his home. life into the storyline steps tough guy Gianni Cellini, punky Italian Despandro. Gassmann of quiet chaos who dispatches his henchmen to kidnap Hunter as one of his ruthless henchmen, perhaps a henchwoman. Statuesque model Kate Nada makes an impressive as well as an intimidating killer babe called Lola. She emerges like a cross between of a sexy Victoria's Secrets model and a trigger-happy small-arm sales lady. She has a tattoo on her inside right thigh of a heavily armed rabbit that reads Death by Rabbit. Aside from one drawn-out dialogue scene between Billings' lonely wife and Frank, Transporter 2 never breaks its stride. Clocking in at Spartan 88 minutes, this adrenaline-laced 20th Century Fox release features a sympathetic hero, a fish villain, and the kind of action that provides a sense of catharsis for audiences that love big, dumb, noisy action movies. Two major scenes stand out for their sheer implausibility. First, Frank eludes the police by crashing through the barrier at a high-rise parking garage and plunging his automobile safely into the confines of another high-rise parking garage. Across the street, as if to compensate, Frank's car slides to a halt sideways at the edge of the parking garage. At a second, the villains have placed an explosive device under the chassis of Frank's car, and he dislodges it by launching his car into the air so that he can knock the device off by hitting a dangling block and tackle hook hanging from a gantry dot. The best parts of Transporter are to involve Frank's former nemesis, French inspector Tarkin, France W. Berland, who comes to visit Frank in Miami, and either man gets to see the other until Frank wraps up the kidnapping caper. Then no sooner has Tarkin arrived at Frank's house than the kidnapping takes place, and the U.S. Marshals descend on Frank's house in hope of catching him in residence. Instead, they find Tarkin baking Medines. At the police station, the Marshals finds it interesting that Tarkin would take the liberty of using another man's kitchen. Taken aback by such questioning, Tarkin explains simply enough that he is French, and afterward, he appraises the terrible-looking sandwich that the authorities have provided him and sets about using their kitchen to furnish them with something edible. This subplot in Frank's use of Terranani to acquire information for him while he is at police headquarters is imaginative and offsets some of the preposterous quality of the action dot. Franchise suffers from some serious engine failure in this too slickly produced sequel and only just makes it over the finishing line. The original had a thin premise and an anorexic plot, but delivered brilliantly choreographed fight scenes and downplayed gun violence. It was simple and straightforward, something that cannot be said for this incomprehensible follow-up or numero duo. The action is relocated from the French Riviera to Miami, a city often featured in Bass equals Too Fast, Too Furious, a Bad Boys. 2 Police Academy 5, Frank Martin, a skin-headed, forever grimacing Jason. Statham no longer takes dodgy packages from point A to point B. Instead, he's temping as chauffeur for a wealthy family. When their kid is snatched by a stereotypical Colombian villain, he springs into action, kicking ass in his own special way. It turns out that the child has been injected with a deadly virus, and everyone he breathes on will catch it, and so on and so on. An interesting story device that soon crumbles into a massive pile of plot holes. You'll be so distracted that you might miss the action, except the action doesn't have the same edge as it did before. I can appreciate far-fetched gun and run movies as long as they stay within a relative distance of reality. Transporter 2 goes way beyond turning Martin from delivery man into indestructible superhero. After a while, you'll realize this guy can do anything and will always walk out of the worst scenario alive. It totally kills the excitement. None of this is the fault of Statham, who once again proves he can miraculously do suave and gruff at the same time. As if the plot wasn't flimsy enough, the narrative completely shatters and will leave you disorientated and lost among the brawling and battling. Characters come and go with no explanation. Subplots are abandoned and the film is totally void of a denouement or climax. All it is showcase a bunch of totally far-fetched fight scenes while failing at everything else that could have made the film a Gale contender. Even the relentlessly silly Danny the Dog Unleashed did better than this, even though it was made by a European director and producer and funded with European money. Something that gave the original such a unique ambiences, this feels an awful lot like a Hollywood trash flick. It's a shame. The FM machine had to lose its wheels so soon. Since the end hints at a third, one can only hope that Louis Leterrier and the Luc Besson get there together. What began as a series made in the hedonistic style of Fantasia, the Gick prototype Aonana, and a kiss of the Dragona has ended in the bargain basement where movies like Esteta and Stubbu, Eta are parked and that ain't good. So on Friday, dear, and I got to see Transporter 2. Yay, my what a silly film. My what bad science. My what fantastic go-boom sequences. It manages to be less plausible than the first by all longer shot. Yes, really. And you can tell I liked it because here is a long spoilery reviews recap thing. So Frank Jason Statham, still fit, is doing a favor for someone by acting as a chauffeur for this little kid who manages to be not exactly annoying, but more utterly forgettable. Hence why I'm calling him the kid, because I can't remember his character name. He gives the kid riddles every day, and there's a certain number of points for whenever the kid gets the answer. I would like to say that I got the answer to the first one at 4 points. Second clue, deer. Did not get it. So yay, I gotta be smug. I won't say what it is because riddles are fun. So go do it yourself when you see the film. The kid's mom, Amber Valletta, who I think always seems really sweet, and dad, Matthew Modine, are having problems because dad has this big, important job that takes him away from his family. They don't actually tell us straight out what his job is until much later into the film, which is a bit annoying. Amber really likes Frank, and she says the kid does, and then her husband's all stroppy with her. So the kid is going to the doctors for his annual checkup. Some bad guys who work for an Italian who does a lot of fancy fighting and has some deadly virus thing get there first and kill the doctor. And his nurse. The bad guys include some generic thug types, Jason Fleming being Russian, and the girl who likes to wander around in her underwear and shooting people. So Frank gives the kid a little motivational talk about not worrying about injections. And then they go into hospital place, and underwear girl Lola is there pretending to be the nurse. Frank notices that she's not wearing anything under the nurse's coat, and that she has a tattoo saying a death by rabbit at the top of her thigh. However, he takes the kid through, and Jason Fleming pretends to be a doctor, and off goes the kid for his examination. Then, Frank goes to get some water, and Tarkin France W. Berlin calls from the airport because he has come for a holiday to visit Frank. Yay! Then Frank notices blood coming from under a door, and then something happens and Lola starts shooting the place up. Frank goes into the examining room and stops them from injecting the kid with the deadly virus. So there's lots of shouting and fighting and shooting and stuff. And eventually, Frank and the kid get out and back to the car, which has had some contraption put on it. Tracker bomb thing. So there might be a car chase. I'm not sure, actually. Maybe there isn't, because Frank gets the kid back to the gates of his house, where there are many people waiting to have a birthday party. And we have a further example of the dad not knowing his son because he gets him a baseball bat and he's now on the soccer team. Blah, blah, blah. And at the gates, someone phones Frank, and then there's a laser sight on the kid's head. And then Lola gets in the car and tells Frank to drive. Amber gets to the gates just in time to see Frank driving off with her kid. Then there is definitely a car chase because the police turn up. It's a very exciting car chase that ends with Frank driving into a multi-story car park and then driving off it and landing in another unfinished building where they spin round and round and round until they stop right on the edge. And it's all very exciting. Then Lola's all like, hey, we lost them. And Frank's going, yeah, broken bar, no. And then you see this helicopter appear, and you go, hey, oh, broken bar crap. And then the angle shifts and you just see the helicopter go boom. And then we're back to the car and Lola's once again, Allah, we lost them. Then my sequencing might be a little out here, but those of you who have read my recaps before will know that scene cuts are the bane of my life. There's all the kidnapped police people setting up in the house, and everyone thinks Frank did it except Amber. And she has a go at her husband again for not knowing his son. Lola makes Frank drive to this place where the Italian stallion is waiting with his henchmen, and they take the kid because if Frank doesn't let them, they're going to shoot the kid or something. And they tell Frank to bugger off, but he sees the contraption thing in a puddle, so he knows what they're doing. So off he drives to scrap the thing off on a crane, as you do. This involves the use of some bad special effects, but sadly, this will not be the last example of bad effects in this film. And at some point in this scene, I think Lola likes Frank's face. And he looks pretty disgusted once he's got rid of the go-what boombox on his car. Frank phones Amber. I've been calling her that because I couldn't remember her character name, but it's Audrey. He tells her to pretend it's someone else and tells her he had nothing to do with it. He couldn't do anything. He's going to get the kid back, etc. I think at some point he phones the police and tries to tell them where the others are going, but they don't listen. Meanwhile, Tarkin is cooking malines, which according to the Transporter DVD commentary, Robert Land absolutely detests, and the police turn up and arrest him. There are quite a lot of in-jokes referring to the last film because he says he's the new cook. Frank goes back to the hospital place and searches for the syringe that they were going to inject the kid with. He finds it, but then he gets interrupted by a couple of policemen's security people, and in the ensuing fight, the syringe gets broken. After he's won, of course, he gets another syringe and fills it with water and goes off to find Jason Fleming. Possibly here's the point where his clothes are all burnt and ruined. So he goes to his boot and takes out his spare shirt, tie, and jacket. Hey, I might have missed a bit because Tarkin gets interviewed by the police and then ends up moaning about the food and cooking crates. Me brulee and stuff for them. Then Frank calls and he says it's his mother and leaves them all entrance by the food and that Caesar's me brule could do good. He goes off and finds an empty desk and finds JF's details for Frank Saban. So then he finds JF and JF panics and there's running and chasing and then Frank jumps onto this jet ski and he flips the girl on it over. Oh, if only he'd landed on the one with the guy and zooms off. JF is on the back of a bus, I think. So Frank gets the jet ski onto the road somehow and they catch up and then he either A, has a bit of a fight and sticks the syringe in JF's leg, or B, just sticks the syringe in JF's leg. JF panics and runs off, and I think Frank follows. Frank follows JF to the science place, which is where the clumsiest exposition ever takes place, as Frank wanders down a corridor and sees all these people in observation rooms with different times on the clocks above the door, and they're all in different stages of illness. Done. Done. So then he goes and finds JF and this other scientist bloke. There was a third guy, but JF shot him because there was only enough antidote for 2. Frank eventually gets him to tell him what it is, and JF gets shot. Not sure by who. Mickey virus airborne. More on this later. Death. Not much antidote. Frank shoots the scientist, I think, and then has to chase after the 2 vials of antidote. One of them gets smashed by a car, and Frank just manages to save the final one. Somewhere along the line, the kid is turned up, and they send in one of those bomb disposal machine things, also seen on Spooks, but it breaks down. So Ember runs up and opens the van herself, and the kid is there unharmed. Except not because, of course, the kid has been injected with the deadly virus. But Frank has the antidote. I just touched this word as a net door. Can't actually remember how Slash when he gets it to them. Then he phones Tarkin again and gets him to look up where the Italian stallion lives. But then someone in the computer room notices, and the police come back to talk to Tarkin again. Oh dear. So Frank goes off to find the Italian stallion who is having all the antidote put in his body, because this is a safer place to keep it than a glass vial. Right, though. Then there's some chatter about why he's doing this, which is essentially money. And he's being paid by the Colombian drug cartels because Matthew Modi is some government guy who's at the forefront of some big crackdown culminating in a conference. This leads us neatly to the kid coughing and a doctor saying it's just a bug. Nothing to worry about is coughing as well. But off he goes. I think this is about where Frank has many fights with people. He uses a fire hose as a rather ace weapon. There is another in joke with some oil, and there is a visual reference to Kill Bill Volume 2. Frank has a fight with this guy on a boat in a very confined space. The KB1 was funnier. I believe the sequence of events after this is that the Italian stallion buggers off, leaving Frank to fight Lola, who ends up dead on some wall decoration or something. Ere I stopped, concentrating for a few minutes, goes off to the conference and breathes on people. Frank phones Amber and tells her about the virus and the antidote and all in a broken bar. Wait, was it actually a virus? Did they say virus? Damn, I can't remember. Sorry, this will make no sense unless I manage to confirm if it was a virus. Also, will make no sense. Unless you've ever seen a TV show called The Tribe. Anyway, Amber phones, but he's in the basement of this building and can't hear her. They both collapse within seconds of one another, and other people around them start coughing again. More on this later. Frank, meanwhile, has driven off to chase the Italian stallion, who is at a private airfield getting onto a plane or something. Long story short, car chases, car gets blown up. Italian stallion all smug. Frank on plane beats up co-pilot and then gets caught. I think lots of smug chat again, and then a fight maybe? I can't remember this bit, because then something happens to the pilot, and Frank and the Italian stallion have a fight in the plane, which is in the process of crashing. This is where the bad effects come in. So fighty fight. Fight plane crashes on the same island as the survivors of Oceanic Flight 815. And everything gets a bit weird, a broken bar. Kidding. What actually happens is no more plausible, because the plane crashes. And then there is some water, but it's not rushing in to kill them or anything. And after Frank has disabled the Italian, Stallion Deer said he broke his back, and it worries me that she could tell. He opens the plane door underwater and they swim out. Now that's not right, surely, because, water pressure and stuff. Then this pissed me off so much, because it just makes it obvious that they hadn't actually thought the science part through. Frank's wandering down a hospital corridor, and he's got a lovely bunch of fat coconuts of flowers, and he gets to the door of this room, and Amber and the kid are all together. The kid's doing a riddle for his parents, and I think I got this one on 3 points. So poor old Frank doesn't get the girl. He leaves the flowers and goes back out to the car park where Tarkin is waiting to be driven back to the airport. So off they go. Then I think once he's dropped Tarkin off, his phone rings and someone says they're looking for a transporter. A still hailing from Luke, Besson's original creation. Statham's Frank Martin has now moved operations from the French Riviera to sunny Miami, where a simple job of driving the son of rich and bickering parents, Matthew Mode and Amber Valletta, to and from school somehow results in the kid being snatched by biochemical terrorists hell-bent on shooting up the town and spreading germ warfare. However, this is all in a day's work for Statham's tough slaphead. Even before then, the credits have begun. Our brawny Brit powerhouse has decimated a bunch of wannabe carjackers and given their young and bucks and decoy a newfound desire to pursue her education. So what chance do Alessandro Gassmann's candle-practicing bad guy Gianni and his legion of disposable goons stand still adhering to his few foolproof rules? Martin will stop at nothing to ensure the safe return of the boy, a surprisingly unannoying Hunter Clary, and effect the delivery of the antidote for the killer virus that has been unleashed into the deep hands of the FBI. British knucklehead Jason Statham was, until Daniel Craig, he buffed up for Bond, our chief beefcake export. What he lacked in charm and versatility, he more than made up for in punishing action man brutality and pure adrenaline. And come to think of it, there is always something more dynamic about a British hero using his fists than any American counterpart. Perhaps it is because they are so rare to come by. But the sound of a Cockney accent, even if it tries to sound American and a Darth of an Aniwise cracks, just makes such a character all the more appealing. With his sly and understated way, with minimalist dialogue and roguish wrong side of the tracks demeanor, Statham is the bad lad made good when it is all going pear-shaped. You don't want a copper. Even Martin Riggs has got to fill out reports at the end of the day. You want someone as fearless and determined as adrenaline junkie Frank to sort things out. Quick on his toes, but warp factor on wheels, he can take out squads of villains with the aid of boats, paint buckets, poles, fire hoses, bead curtains, and, oh yes, his bare hands, all without ruining his suit. And let's not forget that incredible MI3 pilfered files campering amid the roaring traffic to keep the pulse pounding. Far more over the top than the first film, and consequently more enjoyable. Transporter 2 hits all the right buttons and is a testosterone and soaked slice of Back from the Pub movie. Mayhem. No errors and graces, no wit or intelligence in the screenplay department, no middle ground between cause and effect, plot or motivation. What more could you ask for from a kick-ass balls-out action flick? Taking the outrageous stunts from James Bond, Cars leaps between Billings and Statham, even finds the time to catch hold of a speeding plan amid a welter of poor but fun CG and mixing in an incredibly choreographed selection of pure Jackie. Chan-inspired set to Z and Tussle's director Louisier's escapist blast pummel the eye with virtually non-stop impact, heavy melees, and turbocharged auto-ag aggression. The lines are ridiculous. Check out the terrifically deadpan reply Statham gives to Amber Valletta's mistakenly relieved mom upon the supposedly saved return of her son. Jack's been infected with a deadly virus. Audrey, he growls from beneath his almost painted-on stubble. And it is getting slightly irritating seeing his old lock-stock pal Jason Fleming in the getting another free ticket to Hollywood. But the resulting movie is a sheer blast of mad Capadrino anarchy that you can't help falling for. The biological terrorism plot is largely redundant with the child kidnapping angle, naturally far more motive, even if it is ultimately a short-lived element. But the fact is that we don't really need a reason to have Frank take off in single-minded pursuit of uber sexy assassins clad only in Summer's lingerie and a gang of bizarre accented minions who wield anything from guns and knives to axis and germ-laden hypodermics. They just tell us that they are bad guys, and that'll be enough. Honest A and Statham delivers the baddie-battering goods with smirk-inducing aplomb. Definitely a hero forged from the very fantasies of a gang of mates crowded around a telly after a few pints and a pizza. Frank Martin moves like a freight train, kicks like a moo on steroids, and drives hot cars like a speed demon. He is the Bond at the club that kids aspire to be, not working for the government, a code and morals that he makes up along the way, and a surefire devastating don't mess with me attitude that sees him walking casually up to a gunman, letting off reckless rounds at him down a quarter with just the odd shrug of a broad shoulder to avoid those pesky bullets due a plusa. He doesn't have any of those emotional hang-ups or haunting memories that plague all the more righteous do-haters out there, saving the world. It's all about cool, and even if Jason's staff is no Steve McQueen, he sure epitomizes the tough guy archetype with enough capability. I see calm and supreme confidence to win over even the harshest of action hero critics. Set to a persistent soundtrack that is either techno or frenzied rock, the film fairly fizzes with gray determination to engage the primal senses rather than the brain. Frank's undeniable intelligence sharpened to the point of super instinct rather than adjacent Bourne-style thinking ahead of the enemy trick. Check out his expert timing and aerodynamic skills at removing a bomb lodged on the underside of his car. For instance, if things get a tad bogged down with mom and dad, moping around at home with only Keith the Thing, David's FBI hostage team for the company, then you can count on Frank to hijack a jet ski alongside its shapely owner and spew his way after a bad guy riding on the back door of a bus. But as deaf and as irresponsible as all this sounds, Statham just about keeps the daring do grounded with a cool, dry, humored matter-of-factness that just enders him all the more. Ace driver, die-hard brawler, sharp-suited free run, and a effective marriage guidance counselor, and who says men can't multitask. Respect the man's car and he'll respect you. Jason Statham burst onto the scene in 2002. The Transporter, a surprise critical and audience hit. The acting and storytelling in the first film were all top-notch. While the action scenes were inventive, director Corey went in your face, quick cut, shaky cam style gave me a literal headache. I felt like I was getting seizures trying to follow what the heck was going on. Thankfully, the new director, Leterrier, the man who did Jet Li's Unleashed, knows how to do an action scene. He's not nearly as flashy when, and that's why The Transporter to a Cube is that rare sequel that is better than the original. I can talk about the plot, but when you have a crazy wave of a woman, a Lola Katie Nuda, who walks around the middle of downtown Miami in a Fredericks of Hollywood laundry set with 6-in cherry red stiletto pumps, carrying and using 2 machine guns. Do we really need to discuss the plot? Okay, I guess we do. Where to begin? Okay, how about this? This time out, our swab DNI hero Frank Martin Jason Statham is in the States doing a favor for a friend. He's playing driver for a precocious kid who is the child of a wealthy businessman, Dad Billings. Matthew Modi, who also happens to be the new U.S. drugs. The Colombians hire mercenary Gianni Alessandro Gassmann to take out all the world's drug czars who are visiting Miami to attend a major conference. His big plan is to infect Billings' kid with a designer drug and then pass that infection along to conference attendees. It's a flawless plan, but he didn't count on the driver. This is about a numbers action film plot that has no twists, no turns, and several major plot holes you can drive a tank through. And spoiler alert, there is a moment at the end of the film where Gianni takes the entire out. So he becomes the only source for a cure. Thus, when Martin finally confronts him, he realizes that he can't kill him. This would be all well and good if 10 minutes before this confrontation, Martin didn't provide a vaccine for the kid. So, the obvious question that kept screaming through my head was, why the bat? Heck, didn't they just use the kid's blood to create the vaccine? The other problem is early in the film, they set up to the idea that Gianni is a real badass fighter, but the final confrontation takes place in a small, cramped plane. So all you get are a bunch of standard punches, but not much else in a climax. That included one of the worst examples of CGI ever used in a studio film. The acting ranged from good to ridiculous. Statham's performance was top-notch. He didn't have to say much, but his fighting and stoic facial expressions worked for him. After 2 Transporter films, I still have no idea what his actual fighting skill is like. Both directors did utilize quick edits to stage all of his sequences. Neither film included stationary long shots of him pulling off some of the impossible kicks and jumps that he does. Gassman and Mode seemed like they were in a totally different film. Despite some serious flaws and issues with the plot, The Transporter 2A Cubed is a fun, silly, over-the-top, by-the-numbers action film that contains some truly inventive moments. You watch it with a smile on your face, but it's instantly forgettable. I don't have a lot to say about The Transporter 2. It's a sequel that outdoes the original in terms of flair and outrageousness, but it will appeal to much the same audience. If James Bond is too tame for you, Frank, Martin, Jason Statham is your man. This guy is so suave. He keeps an extra suit in his trunk in case he gets blood on his current one. His adventures are lifted directly from the pages of comic book-like with little consideration for prohibitions imparted by the laws of physics, like logic, that sort of thing. Doesn't apply here. A Transporter 2A delights in placing the main character in precarious situations, having him use the most unlikely, not to mention unbelievable methods to escape. The key to the film working is that the filmmakers understand this is all ridiculous, and while they don't play the movie strictly for laughs, nor is it intended to be a parody, they recognize that there needs to be a little tongue-in-cheek. Lead actor Jason Statham is perfect for the part. What Frank lacks in depth, he has no backstory. He more than makes up for in charisma. Strum never cracks a smile when he makes a dire pronouncement. We tend to believe him this time around. Frank, a.k.a. the Transporter, is protecting a different kind of package, a little boy by the name of Jack Billings, Hunter Clary. Jack is the son of a pharmaceutical CEO, Matthew Mode, who is separated from his wife, Audrey Amber Valletta. A group of good Forno thugs are out to kidnap Jack. They include the deadly Lola, Katie Nauta, who likes firing guns while dressed in lingerie, and her lover,
Alessandro Gassmann, who amuses himself by beating up his henchmen in
hand-to-hand combat. At first, it looks like Frank saves Jack from stumbling into a trap. But when the Transporter makes a mistake, the bad guys are ready to capitalize on it. Transporter 2A is almost all action all the time, from opening titles to end credits. There are brief breaks. These are necessary for exposition, plot advancement, and horrible overacting by Matthew Mode, who plays the kidnapped boy's father. The scheme of the kidnappers, which is more complex than one might initially assume, is equal parts audacious and ludicrous. Once the truth is revealed, however, the movie doesn't pause long enough for the audience to contemplate how irrational it is. Instead, it moves smoothly to the next action sequence. A Transporter 2A features plenty of martial arts fights, including one that's a 10-on-1 affair, and chase scenes, most of which end with some vehicle, not necessarily a plane. Airborne. Ina the Transporter. Frank lived by 3 rules in a Transporter 2. He also lives by precepts, but this time there are 4 of them, and they're different than in the original. There's also a little more emotional content this time around, presumably to counterbalance the outlandishness of the action sequences. Frank and Jack have a relationship, and after Jack is snatched, some of what occurs echo as a man on fire. Luc Besson, the French filmmaker who makes Hollywood-style movies, is the co-writer and co-producer of Fat Transporter 2A. He served similar functions, and the Transporter, although Besson often directs, in this case he has ceded the job to Leterrier, whose only other big screen credit is the Jetly vehicle, A Unleashed, also written by Besson. Leterrier knows how to film fight scenes. There's plenty of energy as Statham kicks, punches, and clobbers his way through wave after wave of foes. For fans of Fatha Transporter, a Transporter 2A offers what you're after. Loud, kinetic, unflinching action. In essence, it's more the same. This critique should avoid a certain 2-word descriptive phrase on account of it being just too obvious. That's fair enough. But by Christ, it's hard to resist when confronted with this seriously screwy sugar rush of a sequel, which takes a deranged pride in featuring action scenes by Armani, acting by Millets, whether it's delivering lines like, "Jack's been infected by a deadly virus with a straight face," or genuinely excelling at the physical side. In one vaguely homoerotic scene, he beats a bunch of bad guys with a fire hots. Jason Statham made that rarest of things a convincing British action hero. He establishes himself as a cult figure for anyone who loves a little bit of cheesy deadpan to go with their cheesy deep pan. As such, Transporter 2 is the very definition of a guilty pleasure. Damn it, so close a broken bar. The Transporter 2 is the follow-up sequel which thrusts driver Frank Martin into yet another wild action ride as the mercenary who transports goods. No questions asked. Frank has recently relocated to Miami, where, as a favor to a friend, he is driving the young son of the political Billings family named Jack. Over his short contract with the family, Frank and Jack become fast friends. However, when, despite Frank's best efforts to protect him, Jack is kidnapped. Frank becomes one of the main suspects. In trying to track and defeat the kidnappers, Frank learns that the kidnapping is part of a bigger plot to kill anti-drug officials from around the world. Transporter 2 is an enjoyable action romp that is holistic and thrilling. Jason Statham reprises his role as Frank Martin, and he plays it with an enjoyable mix of no-nonsense, tough guy, heartwarming hero, and a dash of humor. Even so, some of the stunts are over the top and laughable. Also, this movie is definitely an extreme caution because of its intense action sequences, pervasive violence, partial nudity, and brief foul language. Despite these negative elements, the movie has a light moral worldview with elements where hero of the story sacrifices his own well-being. As he attempts to save others, mitigated by some immoral elements, 8 obscenities, including 1 muffled F-word, 1 profanity, and 1 obscene gesture. Very strong action violence throughout the film, including 1 man beats down 4 thugs who try and hijack his car. Villain training in samurai. Sword techniques takes out his aggression on his trainers. A nurse and dentist shot by a female assassin. Several stabbings throughout the film. Plenty of gunfire in the movie. Explosions in a dentist's office. Car crashes. High-speed car chases where a lot of police officers wreck their vehicles and innocent bystanders. Vehicles are hit as well. A child is kidnapped and held for ransom. More of a hero fighting villains and ruffians as well as man fighting female assassin. Man is injected with a syringe. Thug's neck is broken and man paralyzed by a punch to his back and an airplane crashed. Light sexuality includes a female assassin with a penchant for massacres and dances seductively in her laundry in front of several businessmen. Implied fornication between villain and female assassin. A drunk married woman tries to seduce the hero, but he resists, despite being attracted to her. And later she thanks him by saying, "Thank you for the time and respect." And sadist female assassin licks a man's face and dears some partial sexual nudity, though no private parts are exposed, such as female cleavage. Several shots of a tattoo on a woman's upper thigh. The female assassin is shown throughout the film in her lingerie. Apparently, that is the way she likes to dress when she is in murder mode and naturalistic upper male nudity. Female assassin's bare back inside of her breast, shown as well as a brief shot of her behind, and female assassin fights. Hero in her lingerie. Married woman appears drunk, but the drinking is not depicted. Villain drinks in his private jet. And a funny moment where a homeless wino is about to take a drink when a car flies over his head and he decides to put the bottle away, some smoking and kidnapping. A villainous character who blackmails a high-profile family after kidnapping their son. Villain plans to infect people with a deadly virus and hero must defy the system and use vigilante justice in order to stop the villain. But it's usually done more in the spirit of self-defense rather than serious cruelty or vengeance, and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.